Well, Deborah, if you actually go to the Burj Khalifa link on the website, gives you a little blurb information about it as well. The website, on the main website, you click on the room name, Burj Khalifa on the left. Okay, why don't I just share it here? I hope everyone can see the website on the screen. So once you come here, you're typically, if you just want to see the conference program or the proceedings, we either have it as a booklet here that you could go through and browse, or you could even download it if you wanted to keep a copy for yourself, which is right here, this button. If you wanted to actually see it in a table format, then it is here with all the tabs. So we are on day 2 now. So this is what's happening. Then tomorrow would be day 3. And for each parallel sessions that are happening, because in one table here, we are not able to fit all of the details, we've got tabs on top. Like for instance, so if you're on day 2 and you wanted to know about parallel session 1, so that's the presentations, you go here and this is the slot 1, which gives you the 4 rooms and all the parallel presentations. Similarly, we've got the slot in the main rooms for posters, and coming here, you'll get the details for posters, and then here for the parallel workshops. Once you have logged in, you all would have, of course, gotten your access and code. You would have come here to log into the virtual conference platform. And once logged in, you see here all of these on the left-hand side are the rooms. For instance, click here. This is the Burj Khalifa room that we are at the moment in. So you click on this, and this will take you to the room. I'm not clicking anything because I'm actually live, so I don't want to. I don't want anything disappearing on me. As an alternative, just in case the link wasn't working, if you go to webex.com, we've got the meeting number here and the password here to enter directly. Scroll down, we have repeated the agenda here for the 18th, just for your reference. And at the bottom, we've got a section here in case anybody is interested to leave any comments about the presentations they have seen, experience they have had. Similarly, we've got all the rooms on the left, up here on the left side that you can see. If you scroll down further, we've got information about your post-workshop conferences. There are 2 of them that are happening, and they're again going to be happening virtually. Our partnering campuses, Gulf Medical University and British University, are kindly organized this. So the links have been actually shared with you in the emails that went out. And plus, we will update this at the end of tomorrow. All of these are the sponsor pages that we talked about. So, for instance, if you have to go into Turnitin, you would see they had a networking session yesterday. So that was the link, and this is the link that would have taken you to Burj Khalifa had you entered it from here. Their tweet is here, so anything they're tweeting live, you would be able to keep a track. They have shared a number of videos about their products and services, and there's an individual chat room for Turnitin. So if you have questions, please do feel free to put it in here for any of the sponsors. They have told us they will keep an eye on this and reply back to you guys. So effectively, that's about it. The gala dinner and NI award function is going to happen in room Marhaba, which is the last link here if you click. So again, the link is here, the details of alternate ways to enter it here, and the flyer for the event is here with the details of what you want to do. So we do hope you all join us in the evening today. Evening for us, not sure what it will be for you all. So that's the website. Hope it helped. Hi, Teddy. I know you had some technical issues.
Yes, I did. I'm working through them. One of them was that you can't have multiple windows open of WebEx, so I figured that one out. You guys are all going to have to bear with me. This is now 6:30 in the morning, and I have been up all night so that I could, be ready for this. So if I'm a little loopy, you're just going to have to forgive me because the time is weird. Let me know when you're ready.
Yeah, so I will stop sharing so you can share
Okay.
your presentation.
Good morning, everyone, or good afternoon, or good evening, wherever you are from. Good whatever that thing is. I am Teddy Fishman, and I know a lot of the people who are listed, whose names that I can.
Well, you started.
Oh, I'm sorry. Did you not?
I was going to introduce you.
Sorry. I'm sorry. I thought you wanted.
I just thought you'd upload your slides.
Okay, I will stop now again. Sorry.
Sorry about that.
No worries. I thought that's what you were telling me to do.
Sorry
I told
about
you
that.
I'm super tired.
Okay, so I think it's past 2:31 here, so we will start. We've got about 40 people already attending, so thank you everybody for coming back to the session and staying with us. I know it's been a long day and it's been a little crazy with the technology, but you guys have been really patient and really, really supportive. So a huge thank you from all of us here at PAEB 2020. So we are quite excited for the next invited session where we've got Dr. Teddy Fishman. Again, somebody I know doesn't need an introduction because anybody in academic integrity knows who Teddy is. And personally, I'm a huge fan, and she's been a tremendous source of mentorship and advice for me, just like Dr. Tracy Protect has been. And after Tracy, it was Teddy who introduced me to a lot of the concepts of working on conferences and how to handle all the craziness that goes on behind. Really excited to introduce Dr. Teddy Fishman, who everybody knows directed the International Center for Academic Integrity for nearly a decade. She is such an advocate for authenticity, experiential and engaged learning for everybody, and she's so ready to always help everyone everywhere that it's a pleasure and an absolute honor to have her here join us and support our conference today. So Teddy, here you go, round two.
Thank you so much. Well, first of all, thank you very much for that. And anytime I am mentioned in the same sentence with Tracy, I'm always incredibly flattered. I'm also really happy to be here at the first virtual conference of ours. I guess that's the beginning point of this talk, is that I don't know how it is in the places where you are, but here that is like dominating reality. Like everywhere you look, everything is affected by the pandemic. And I think we're very fortunate that we can continue this conference. And thanks to everybody who has made that possible. The University of Wollongong, Mendel University, which I misspelled, I realize on this slide now. Our sponsors, everyone who made time amid this pandemic to be here. That shows that this is important to you, and I'm very grateful. I think we're very thankful that we can meet. I am very thankful that we can meet, and I thank Inai and Zenith and her team for making that happen. So I'm going to start with a little unpacking of the notion of crisis. We have been hearing crisis for a long time, and in academic integrity, we use that term often to describe what's happening. And it's interesting because in the history of academic integrity, they've always been in crisis mode. Oh my God, the students are doing these things and they're terrible, and it's going to be the undoing of education. And so I wanted to unpack the term a little bit. I looked at a couple definitions that just had to do with a time of confusion, a time of disagreement, a time when things are being hashed out, a crucial stage. But the element of crisis that I think is most significant, at least most aspirational to us, is the aspect of crisis that says that you have the opportunity for things to be different, or perhaps you have the likelihood or eventuality that things are going to be different, that this is going to be a turning point, and before is going to be one time and after is going to be another time. And I really think that that's the situation that we're in here with the COVID virus. And I also think that it's something that we can hope for to be the case with respect to academic integrity, that before it was one way and after it was another way. When I looked it up among our literature, American literature in particular, and when I say literature, I mean like trade journals and things like that, there is this quote that John F. Kennedy used many, many times that talked about how the Chinese have two different characters that make up the word crisis, and one is the word for danger, and the other is the word for opportunity. And unfortunately, just like a lot of the tattoos that Americans come home with when they go to exotic places, that's not actually true. That's not how those brushstrokes actually work. Actually, when they are combined, they mean something very similar to the common notion of crisis, that it is a place, a situation, or a point in time that you have to be wary, that you have to be cautious, that you have to be on your guard. And I thought that even though the thing that we are so familiar with is apocryphal, it still is a very useful opportunity, because crises, at least if they don't give you any other opportunities, they give you an opportunity to examine what's going on from a different perspective, because a crisis forces us all into a different perspective, and sometimes that's really useful, even if we don't like it and even if it isn't fun. So I was looking at the lessons that seem to apply both to the pandemic crisis and to the crisis that we have with respect to academic integrity. And the first lesson, the really critical lesson, is one about transparency. One of the huge factors, one of the huge complicating factors, one of the huge factors that's making the virus more difficult to deal with is that initially, at least, many governments, multiple governments, did not necessarily recognize the danger as it occurred. And one of the things that's happening now is that the different governments and the different organizations are all trying to blame that on each other and say, well, you didn't say that it was bad enough, and you didn't say that it was this serious. But in reality, that's something that multiple governments have done, and it was harmful. And the reason that it really stood out to me is because when I go and talk to universities about their academic integrity issues, they all, to a university, all of them, unless they've just been involved in a scandal, will tell me, well, I don't think that the situation is necessarily that serious here. I know that some universities have trouble with it. We don't really have that kind of an issue here. Our students are, and then they name some reason that their students are going to be different than all other students in the world. And they tend to minimize the harm that is happening on their campuses, at their university, because nobody wants to admit, and this goes for viruses and academic integrity issues, nobody wants to admit that they have a serious problem. It's as if it casts an unfavorable light on them. And that's why I thought it was a really useful thing to look at with respect to the virus, because when it comes to the virus, it's very easy to see, and I think most thinking people would agree, that initially there wasn't anybody to blame for the virus. It jumped, it's a zoonotic virus. It jumped from an animal species to a human species. Nobody intended for that to happen, and yet no government wants to take responsibility for it having happened and having spread to their population. And I would like for us to kind of take that lesson on board regarding academic integrity and kind of share that with the universities that we work with and say, listen, this is a thing with respect to academic integrity. This is actually, if you're going to talk about it in lost my words, it's too early. If you're going to talk about it as a pathology, it's an endemic problem that all the universities that we've surveyed have. So to admit that your university has it is just the same as admitting that they have, I don't know, dandruff or, foot fungus or, something that just is around. It isn't anybody's fault. It just exists. So the first lesson is just about transparency and looking at this pandemic and seeing how much harm could have been mitigated if we had just said, okay, this is a situation. It's really bad. It isn't anybody's fault. Let's see what we can do to contain it before it spreads any further. So that's lesson one. The second lesson is very much related. It's the follow-up work that's necessary. Once you admit that you actually have a problem, then you have to identify what the problem is. You have to recognize what the problem is, and you have to start trying to understand the problem. And that's part of the harm that comes from the lack of transparency. Is if you're spending your energy saying we don't really have this problem, or if you're just letting it be neglected because you said that we don't have this problem, then you're wasting time where you should be identifying, recognizing, and understanding the problem. With respect to the virus, that could have been having a teams of experts come and try to help figure out what was going on and how to contain it when it was more contained to start with. And then when you lose that opportunity, you've just lost that opportunity. So with respect to academic integrity, if you don't really get into the weeds and see, okay, not only what do students say they do, as Thomas said earlier, we can't rely on what students say that they do, because first of all, they don't even necessarily recognize what we're asking them, because we tend to have different lexicons, different vocabularies. And secondly, just the way that human beings process information is when we do something bad, often we don't see it as the bad thing that we see it as when somebody else does something bad. So, for instance, if you're speeding and you run a red light, what you tend to say, what I tend to say when it's me is, oh, I was just in a hurry and it was just a tiny little bit. That doesn't really count. And there's no reason to think that students would do that any less. So, so after we first are transparent and let ourselves and let other people see what's going on, the next necessity, the next lesson is that we begin to identify and recognize and understand the problem without, without necessarily, we can have a judgment about it, but that shouldn't interfere with the way that we try to investigate it, because after all, we are academics and we know how to investigate things, and there's still so many aspects of plagiarism and other academic integrity issues that we don't have a full handle on, because we haven't done the hard work of kind of going out and observing them in the wild, rather than just relying on self-reported data or relying on what we catch, which again is a parallel with the virus. And it's so striking to me that we are having all kinds of discussions in the news and amongst governments that talk about how many cases they have without having done comprehensive testing. So just like academic integrity stuff, when people ask me, well, what's the real number? How much cheating do we really have? I tell them we have two ways that we really measure this. We measure it by what students say they do and what we catch them doing. And we know that both of them are seriously underrepresenting the problem, in the same way that we know that if we only test people when they come into the hospital and they're gravely ill, we're not catching all of the COVID-19 cases. So there's no reason to believe that we actually know in either case how much cheating is actually going on. What we have is a floor, like we know in both cases, like we have at least this much, but we don't know what the ceiling is. And there's no way that we have to know that based on the data that we're collecting now. So that's lesson number 2. Lesson number 3, sometimes you have to teach people things that everybody thinks they know, or everybody thinks other people should know. And this struck me immediately when we started having all of the PSAs about hand washing. I know I would like to believe that everybody knows how to wash their hands, at least all adults know how to wash their hands, but they did some research and apparently most of us are doing it wrong. And there were some really excellent demonstrations where people took, some kind of colored ink and put it in the soap so that it showed where the soap was actually going. And then, they didn't look at it. They just did their normal hand washing routine. And then they looked at their hands and there were, clearly areas where no soap had touched. And that's the same thing that we have going on with citation. Is if I had a nickel for every time someone has said to me, we shouldn't have to teach that, or the students should already know this, and all I can say to that is, I'm not even disagreeing. I don't even have a position on whether they should or shouldn't. Ideally it would be nice, but I do have a position about whether they do know it, and we know that a lot of them cannot put it into action even when the stakes are really clear and even when they know we're checking. So I'm coughing, and that is not COVID. That is allergies. So that's lesson number 3, is that it doesn't really matter what you think people should know or what you think you know. if an expert is telling you, listen, people don't know this, we have to teach it to them, or if research has shown they don't have a handle on it, it's just silly for us to keep saying we shouldn't have to do that, because it helps if we do it. That's lesson number 3. All right, lesson number 4. When you have a crisis, it reveals a lot of important things to know. It reveals where the breaking points are. It reveals where the weaknesses are. Crises reveal, how people have internalized rules and norms, and it lets you know a lot about where your attention needs to be paid. In my country, in the U.S., one of the things that it's really shedding light on is the income inequality and how much that affects the rate of spread, the rate of transmission. In other places, it reveals some of the gaps in regulations and the gaps in being able to ask people to comply. And in other places, it reveals that some of the measures to get people to comply also might have some deficits, right? So there are all kinds of very important things that we're learning. Again, maybe some of them aren't so maybe we would wish that we were not learning those things, but in all cases, it's better to know. Like, I just believe 100% that each time you get a window into what is needed and what is sufficient and what is provided, whether it's COVID-19 or whether it's academic integrity, that is a window that you should never not look in. With respect to academic integrity, when we have a cheating scandal or when we have a crisis where all of a sudden a bunch of the graduates don't know what they're supposed to know, it lets us know that something in the educational system is broken. And a lot of the things that we are doing are outdated. They're based on just wildly not relevant anymore conceptions of what people know once they get out into the world. They are not resonating with students, or they are still useful and still important, but we're not doing a good job of conveying them. And that's another thing. Like, even crises come in all kinds of sizes. And if the crisis that you happen to have is that 30% of 30% of the students in a particular class are cheating, that lets you know that there's something going on in that class, and it might be internal to the class and it might be external with the students, that needs to be addressed. And crises give us an opportunity to look for structural insufficiencies, I guess, is what applies across the board. And if we pay attention to those things, we have an opportunity to make things better. So that is lesson number 4. All right, lesson number 5. Lesson number 5 is my favorite lesson, actually. And that is the lesson that tells us that neither the pandemic crisis nor academic integrity crises are issues that we can solve on our own, because they are deeply rooted in our communities. They're rooted in our community norms. They're rooted in our community values. And students again and again have shown us that what's going to be more important to them than anything that's in a rule book, anything even that their parents taught them before they got to school, is what everybody else is doing. And that's what we're seeing with the coronavirus in terms of social distancing, in terms of paying attention to masking and paying attention to not gathering. All those things are functions of community, and it gets even bigger than that. Like, we are in a pandemic situation. We have to pay attention to what is happening, across borders, across countries, across states, across oceans, even, because we are such a mobile society. And these are two problems that we cannot solve on our own. And the good thing, the reason that this is my favorite slide, is that there are champions everywhere who are stepping up and making tremendous sacrifices and doing things that they never thought that they would be called upon to do, to leave the house every day and not be sure if you're going to get a deadly virus because it's your job and you're a nurse or you're a doctor or you are somebody who stocks grocery store shelves or you are somebody who delivers food to people who can't get out. Like the fact that people are doing the things that they need to do and taking all the precautions every day and risking their own lives, I mean, that is championed on a grand scale. And academic integrity has its champions that don't have to risk as much, but that stand up and take risks and are leaders. And when people see that other people are willing to make those sacrifices, I don't know, the upper right slide, the text in Greek, and I'm relying on the translation because I cannot read that myself, says that we are here for you, please stay home for us. And that's the kind of leadership that gets people's attention. And we have that opportunity too with respect to academic integrity when we are in front of people and say to them, this is what I do when I don't know how to cite something. And this is the mistakes that I've made. And these are the things that I have to pay attention to. And here are some ways that I grew as a learner and as an academic writer. That makes a connection with students in ways that that just telling them these are the rules and you have to follow them and acting like it comes naturally to us. Because I don't know if what happens with us is we've been in this life for so long, we've been in academia for so long, that the conventions of citation and even the fact that we know that we have to cite, that seems like a normal state of affairs. But it's not always the case that it definitely is not the case to people when they first enter that community that it seems like the natural state of affairs, and especially when they have had differences in their level of preparation. So that's lesson 5. I'm just going to change slides. Maybe I'm not. Just a second. I am slide stuck for just a second. Let's see if that works. There we go. Okay, so so I outlined some of the similarities. I've talked about a lot of them, so I'll kind of go through this quickly. The parallels and similarities between the COVID-19 crisis and our academic integrity crises are that honesty and transparency are really critical, and the earlier we can address problems, the more containable those problems will be. And with respect to our situation in particular, if we can catch students when they are in the learning mode as opposed to in the turning things into be evaluated mode, we have an opportunity to help them address their academic integrity issues as allies. And that's another thing that the COVID-19 situation has made really clear, is that if we can relate to each other with, with that kind of spirit of cooperation as allies, then we don't have to hide as much from anybody. I mean, and then we can engage in things more productively. The second parallel is that investigation and rigor are absolutely key. And even though both of these things are things that nobody wants associated with them, a deadly virus or an academic integrity deficit, we have to understand them to understand the problem. And I'm going to say just a little bit more about that in just a second. The next thing is that education and professional development, and by that I mean teaching the people who teach the students, they're absolutely key, and that is something that has to be ongoing. No situation, no amount of professional development is going to teach somebody how to deal with all the things that they need to deal with, and sometimes you have to back up and go back and address some of the rudimentary skills. And if that means teaching people how to wash their hands, or if that means teaching people, quotation marks go on the outside of quotes, then that's what we need to do. We, if we do that the second part of investigating what needs to happen, then the next thing to do is address those deficits where they are, whether or not we feel like those are things that we should have to deal with. Fourth, crises reveal areas that need to be addressed, and those things are things that we often don't want to see. And it's our job to see them anyway, because we are researchers and we are supposed to look at what's there and not what we want to see. And then number 5 is that making real progress, and making especially sustainable progress, requires community. And that's one of the things that the Center for Academic Integrity identified early on as one of the big game changers. Donald McCabe went into his investigations thinking that honor codes were going to be the key. And toward the end of his time researching academic integrity, he was convinced that community was really probably a bigger key than the honor codes, because community is what decided how we internalized what was in the honor code. It's all well and good to have a lovely honor code, but if the people in the community don't buy into it, or if the people in the community don't even know about it, then the honor code just sits there. All right. I can't progress the other way. This. All right. So because I've used this metaphor of disease or contagion for academic issues or plagiarism, I just want to include a little bonus lesson, which is it's really, really important. And this is another lesson, and this is a lesson that our leaders here are not learning very well. And that is, it is really important to distinguish between behaviors and infections. Like infections are something that happens, from the outside and not something you choose. And behaviors obviously are things that we choose to do, but also it's really important not to conflate the person with the disease, right? We don't want coronavirus, but we do want to help the people who are out on the cruise ships and not just leave them floating from place to place, right? Because those are human beings. Same thing with academic integrity, especially when students come in ill-prepared to understand and address academic integrity. We don't want the plagiarism. We want to help the students. And if we just say, okay, students, you're out, if we just say, like, we're going to expel you from our community, then we haven't helped the student. The student hasn't necessarily learned how to do the thing that they were supposed to do. And we haven't really made anything better, right? Our job is education. So it's really important to focus on the fact that we want to minimize the amount of academic integrity breaches that we have, but we don't want to minimize the academic integrity breaches by tossing out the students. And there's some more about using this metaphor. The study that I cite right down there shows how it can actually be really useful to talk about academic integrity breaches or plagiarism as a disease, but you just have to be really careful how you do that, so you make sure that students don't feel like they're associated with the disease forever. All right, the last thing that I want to say, and I think my time's about up, so that's probably good, is that all of these things take courage, and particularly the two doctors who are in the middle. The one on the left is the doctor who initially raised the flag about the coronavirus, and if I weren't so tired, I would actually probably still have forgotten their names because I'm just really bad at that. And the one on the right, of the two in the middle, the one on the right is the one who brought it further to our attention, and he actually passed away from the disease. So that was like the most courage that you could possibly have, like not only bringing up a subject that you knew your government didn't want to talk about, but also remaining there on the front lines to the point where it actually ended his life. So we, luckily, do not usually have viruses to deal with in academic integrity. We still have to show courage. There are a lot of people doing that can provide inspiration to us. And we have some great leaders of our own who, if I would have thought about it, I would have interspersed with these pictures here. Thank you guys so much for listening to my talk. Thank you for my being around and listening to this extended metaphor. And I hope that we get to have some conversations about this over the rest of the conference. Thank you again, Zenith, and I will give it back to you.
Wow, thank you so much, Teddy. I think definitely a round of applause. Leave it to Teddy to think really outside the box and make a link between academic integrity and COVID-19. But I think it was so on point. I'm going to just head it back out to the room. Anybody has any questions? Unfortunately, when I'm sharing the room, I'm not able to keep the chat open because then it covers quite a bit of the screen. So I was not monitoring the chat, which I will just go through now. But if anybody is interested, kindly please raise your hand or just unmute your mic and ask Teddy a question. She's been kind. She has shared her Gmail address as well for anybody who's interested to get in touch with her. I'm going up. I see some comments. Deb has said people wish we had something like the COVID rapid test for detecting academic misconduct. But there is no such rapid test, as Thomas has pointed out, and there never will be. Academic integrity is far more complex than a single organism such as the coronavirus.
I will have a video. The person who asked if I have a video, so this is one way that this virus has personally affected me is I live out in the country on a farm, and my internet is terrible. So I have always, through my whole professional life, I've just gone to a place, go to a Starbucks, go to somewhere else, and done my data heavy things. And so I have been working. Poor Zenith, I promised her this like many days ago. I've been trying to figure out a way to get this to go through my crappy internet, and I haven't figured out how to do it. But I promise you that I absolutely will do it. I'm sure that if I just get some tech savvy help, somebody can help me to compress it enough so that I can get it to you.
Is it the video for this presentation?
Yeah, that's what I mean. Is I have the video for this presentation where I talked through not exactly this exact script because I don't tend to follow a script exactly, but I have one that I have recorded. But my internet, the upload speed is so terrible that I generally cannot do uploads. Like I don't do video of myself online usually because I just the upload speed makes it glitchy. So I have not been able to get a whole file to go through with the audio because it makes it, I already have a bunch of pictures as you can see, and then with the audio it just made it a huge file.
Right. Just for everyone's information, all our sessions are being recorded and they usually take about 24 to 48 hours to render. And once the conference is over, we will be making each of those sessions available online as well, besides the presentation, individual presentation.
Oh, there we go. So then maybe I don't have to try to force this thing through. Yeah, I live way out in the country in South Carolina, so that is not the best place to try to do internet. And usually I just go into the city and sit at a Starbucks and do it. But this one you can make public. You can share this with whoever you want.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you guys. Thank you. Oh, go ahead.
Claire from University of South Wales.
Hi, Claire.
Hi. Yeah, I really loved your hand washing analogy. I think that's so true because one of the things sort of I've identified is that the teaching staff say they've taught the students at the beginning of the year what they need to know, and then later on in the year you ask the students and they sort of either claim that they know but clearly don't, or they just don't know at all. So I think revisiting those skills is really important. I love the analogy because it makes it really easy to understand.
Well, thank you so much. Yeah, I felt the same way, and I heard the same things. I heard people saying, we don't know how to do it. We don't know how to do it. And I was watching and I was like, like maybe I don't know how to do it, because that's the thing about not knowing, is when you don't know, you also don't know you don't know. So thank you so much.
No, thank you. It's really good, really great presentation.
Thanks.
Okay, we are also heading to the next phase of the conference, which is the networking break. Anybody else has any questions for Teddy?
Can I say something? It's Daniel here.
Hi, Daniel.
Yeah, in your lesson 4 slide, you don't have to go back to it. You said some teachers say we shouldn't have to teach it. And you mentioned that we should be integrating the plagiarism process into the writing process. And the teacher should be in their hands and all. Well, in my presentation later tonight, this isn't meant to be marketing, but anyway, it is. In my presentation later tonight, I present actually some research where I did that. I did a comparative research. And yeah, they were only first-year students that had the interactive community way of writing. And yeah, the cut and paste plagiarism was reduced significantly. Yeah, so
that's wonderful.
I've done this over many terms and it works. The opportunity to copy and to cheat is totally reduced. Yeah, they start to associate with what they're writing and they have a sense of ownership. Yeah.
That is fabulous.
Yeah.
Fabulous.
You are totally right as far as I'm concerned.
Thank you. I love that you did that. And I especially love it because it takes, a little bit of extra time. but the students now have it. If you give it to them later, they have it at a time that they can apply it. You know what I mean? It's almost like just in time instruction. So, oh, I need to do this now, and you've just told me.
Well, yeah, Alice says as far as corrective feedback goes, it's the best way to learn at the point of need.
Yes, yes, exactly.
Thank you.
Thank you.